Hey guys, it's a beautiful morning. We're near Phoenix, Arizona. We've got a new one from iGO here, just arrived. They ship these things to the United States, but it's a Canadian company based in Montreal. They've been around since 2006. They've got a 2-year warranty, and they've got, looks like 30 or 40 dealers at this point, a few in the United States. So there's Nice Wheels in New York City, E-Bikes of New England, and then Amper Electric Bikes in Michigan. Again, having a bike shipped like this, especially international, is really interesting. I'm excited to see what's inside, but it looks like it was packaged really well. We've got all these extra kind of straps and stuff, and I think it was even certified with ISTA, the International Shipping Transport Association. So yeah, I'm just going to jump in. This is the Elite model, so it's really approachable, low step through, a lot of neat features. Let's get to it. I love that iGO's so focused on doing partnerships with shops. It makes the experience a lot better in my mind. But if you do have to get it shipped, that is free, so it's included. Yeah, I just got that top open. Looks like there's some extra cardboard padding, so this thing could be flipped or placed on the end and it wouldn't mess up the fenders or the saddle. It's looking pretty good. I'm gonna keep digging in. Okay guys, this is what it looks like when you've got it out. Kinda, I had to cut some zip ties and stuff. The front wheel is completely unattached, and then that front rack is also just really well protected. Nothing seems damaged except possibly a little bit of a scratch on that cap there for the top. We are going to need a pump because I noticed that both tires were basically uninflated. You can see that down here, so make sure you have one. I always carry mine around. Really like these air tools from Specialized. Also, if you speak French, it's kind of neat that they give you a French manual, right? And then this little toolkit, there's the skewer for the front and some wrenches and stuff. Gets the job done. Also the charger, this is a 2-amp charger. That's kind of basic. It weighs about 1.6 pounds, so not too heavy, and it's got the little circular plug. And again, here's the inside of the box. It just seemed like it did a good job. It didn't punch through too much. There's a little bit of a rip, but for something that's being shipped internationally like this, that's not bad at all. Also, I wanted to point out it's Amp Brothers Electric Bikes in Michigan, just to give them a shout out and not to confuse you guys too much. I've never been before, but being able to go and actually see one of these bikes in person, take a test ride, is definitely worth it. This is still a fairly big purchase for a lot of people, and you might be familiar with some of the earlier iGO electric bikes from like 2017. They had one, it was called the Explore, and it had two top tubes, right, that protected the battery and might have added some frame strength and reinforcement. But this one's a little bit lower standover height, just very approachable. Kind of the founder of iGO, running the company, told me that this is designed to fit people from 5 foot all the way up to 6'2". So it's really kind of like do everything platform with that step through. And if you want to make sure that you can lower the seat enough and adjust the handlebars and stuff, being able to go to one of those shops is great. I wish I could tell you all the shops in Canada, but I'm sure at their website they've got a good dealer tool. So I'm going to go ahead and build this thing. And this is sped up so much. You can just see the sun, the shadow sort of gracing across the driveway there. And I'm messing with the stem and trying to get that all set up right. At this point, the bottom bracket, tightening some things, putting the pedals on. It didn't say right or left for the pedals, so I kind of just had to fool with it until I got it figured out. And then this is the light. I was trying to be really careful with that. Got it all set up. And then the front wheel. Wow. Well, it took me about 50 minutes to assemble that bike completely. I definitely took my time. One thing I want to recommend being really careful about is when you're cutting the zip ties, because there's this tiny little wire for the headlight. Also the wires up here, I actually scraped this one a little bit because I was cutting and it just kind of grazed it. Just take your time. Go slow. You don't want to clip something and then end up with a bike that's not going to work. Also, when I was adjusting the handlebars, I pulled the brake lever a little bit, and when the front wheel isn't on and you don't have this disc going into those calipers, sometimes the calipers can pull shut and then get stuck that way, and it's hard to undo them. So before you have the front wheel mounted, just be extra careful with that brake lever. These are really nice brakes, Tektro. They've got the motor inhibitor here, so anytime you pull them, it's going to kill the motor. Also, got an integrated bell, really like that. One of the other sort of challenging parts for me was getting this new adjustable angle stem on. So you have to slide this little lever down, open it up, and then position the handlebars all the way down for this hole. I'm just going to try to do this for you. See, so open it way up and then position it way down and see how that hole lines up. And then there's a bolt that you sort of screw down, and that's what clamps this stem right down onto that steering tube. And you want to line that up so that the bike is steering straight before you tighten those other bolts on the side. So there's just some extra little steps, but once you've got it set up, you can adjust these handlebars really nicely, bring them way up like this for a comfortable upright position, angle the bars, all kinds of adjustability there. However, when you tighten this, see it kind of locks in. Just, pay close attention to this, because I have seen where sometimes you could be riding a bike like this and hit a really big bump, and over time this could kind of loosen up and the bars might accidentally tilt forward on you, especially if you're a big person, maybe a little bit more weight, and you're really wrenching down on those handlebars. So just, keep an eye on that kind of thing. The rest of the bike assembled pretty well. I was inflating the tires. They are 50 to 85 PSI. I'm a relatively lightweight rider. I'm like 135 pounds. So I inflated them to about 60. I wanted to be at the lower end of the pressure so that I could actually have some shock absorption, a little bit of comfort. This does have a suspension fork. It's a little bit more basic, but it's SR Suntour, and see these caps, these plastic caps on top? You can actually pop those up and adjust preload. Okay, so that's kind of cool, because if you're someone who's a little bit heavier, you can preload that suspension and sort of tighten the spring down so that it's not always just like squished all the way down. You're still allowing yourself some travel length, but the shock is loaded, that spring is loaded. This is a coil fork, so it's a little bit heavier, a little bit more basic. You don't have lockout, you don't have, rebound adjust, any of the fancy stuff like air suspension. Also, we've got that kickstand. See, it's kind of in the way of that left crank. So if let's say that you're in the garage, you've gone in, you've parked it, and then you're getting ready to go for a ride, and you back the bike up, see that crank arm collides with the kickstand, and over time it's gonna scrape the paint a little bit, but it's an aluminum alloy. It's not going to rust. Same with the rest of this frame. We've got a rear rack here, 25 kilogram max weight. It's about 55 pounds. Not bad, and it does have these external pannier hangers, so you can add panniers, and they're going to be protected a little bit from the tire, from the rim, and those spokes. It's got a bit of a guard here, and this triple bungee that comes just stock with the bike. I really like that. They've got bottle cage bosses here. That's another place to add either a cup holder for some fluids, or maybe a folding lock or a mini pump or something, and that way you don't have to have a bag and panniers and stuff. You could just have something for around the neighborhood. You can enjoy yourself and have some drink with you. And then this front rack, they've done a really good job, because when you steer the bike, see, the rack doesn't steer, it just stays straight, and that means it's mounted to the frame here. It's really sturdy. However, the light is also mounted to the rack, so when you turn, that light is not going to turn. It's just going to be pointing straight. It's kind of a trade-off. I like that the light is suspended. It's not here on the arch of the suspension. It's possible you could actually mount it there, but then it's going to bounce and kind of vibrate as you're going over rough terrain. So they're really thoughtful. A couple other things I wanted to mention back here when I was talking about the stem and tightening it down. The tool that they gave you, it's a little bit more basic. Some of these are already starting to strip a little bit at the ends, and they just aren't as long. Okay, so I think I was using like this tool, trying to get all the way down into that stem and tightening it, and then you don't have much leverage up here. So I got a pair of like pliers here to grab onto that to really tighten it down. And then eventually I just opted for my own tools. They're much longer and they could go really deep down there, and it wasn't quite so precarious. It seems like they're missing some washers. And so the reason that those washers would be important is because when you're mounting the light, it says you're supposed to sandwich the bolt and the nut, and have to have some washers in there. But they didn't have enough. I ended up using most of the washers for this front rack, because it said you're supposed to have 4 for that, but one of them is a little bit thicker. So I feel like maybe they just don't have washers for this front rack, or maybe the one I got didn't have it. I got 5 washers, so I chose to use 1 on just the top part of the light. They wanted to have 2, and then 4 on this rack. Then we're gonna mount that front fender here in a second, and it's supposed to have some washers there too, so it doesn't scratch the arch. And I don't have them. I don't have the washers. So anyway, that's still a couple steps left. I'm gonna charge this thing up, make sure we're all set before we do a ride test. But I wanted to give you that feedback about what tools you'll need. There was one other tool that didn't come with, which is just a standard, that's Phillips screwdriver. So I had one of those laying around. I went and grabbed it, and I'm getting excited about this thing. I mean, it looks really comfortable, really nice tires. You can see that there's reinforcement eyelets on the rims, so they're going to be a little bit stronger. Schwalbe Energizer Plus. Energizer is like the e-bike specific tire from Schwalbe, and they've got they're rated up to like 28 mile per hour, riding really efficient. They've got puncture protection, they've got reflective sidewalls, and this platinum metallic color is also going to give you a little bit of visibility at night if you're riding around. So you're going to be seeing, you know, lights, reflective sidewalls. There's just a lot here. Yeah, I'm really excited. Oh, also the rear fender, I adjusted this a little bit, kind of extended these struts so that the fender would be raised up. I'm not going to rub on that tire and create like a bzzz noise. Also, both of the sides are adjusted so that it's positioned really well. It connects here near the bottom bracket, up here near the seat stays, and then there's nothing in the middle. So this is where it might bounce around and rattle. Plastic fenders tend to be very durable. You know, you can bump them and stuff and they just spring right back. They don't get bent like aluminum, and they're not gonna rust like steel, but they do tend to vibrate a little bit more. And if there was just one more support strut right here somewhere in the middle of the rack, that would really tighten it up and it would be a little bit quieter. I've seen that on some of the even nicer bikes, but considering this thing was just shipped to me, there really aren't a lot of, you know, there's no damage that I've seen. The only damage is me scratching up the cables. So again, just be careful with that, and yeah, we'll take the next step. Hey guys, so the bike is all set up. I've been having a blast riding around the neighborhood and just really diving into the menu system and exploring all the details on this bike. I want to go through real quick and do an overview because there's so much to appreciate here, starting with the black rims with those reinforcement eyelets I talked about before. These are 12 gauge spokes in the rear, also black hub motor, 500 watt nominal. That's pretty zippy. Geared hub motors tend to be lightweight, they freewheel efficiently, they produce a little bit more buzzing noise, but look how small that is. You know, it really hides behind this cassette. This is Shimano Altus. This is an 8-speed cassette, 11 to 34 teeth. We're in the lowest gear right now, and it's still takes a little bit to get going. This isn't a mountain bike, but the idea is that at 20 miles per hour, you've got these smaller sprockets and you can pedal pretty efficiently. 42 tooth chainring up here. This is a steel chainring, a little bit cheaper. If it gets scratched, it could start to rust or something, but I love that there's a chain cover to keep your skirt or your pants from rubbing on that chain. There's no guide, there's no bash guard on it, but again, this is kind of a neighborhood bike in my opinion. 170 millimeter alloy crank arms, that's pretty standard. VP plastic pedals with rubber tread, and that's nice because if you slip off, you're not going to cut your shin. However, you might slip off a little easier because they aren't quite as big. They don't have metal pins. You can replace those for like 20 bucks with some Welgos off Amazon, so not a big deal. I don't think you're going to have too much trouble with the chain dropping off on this. It's not a mid-drive, but again, there's no guide, and if it does drop off, it's going to fall kind of back in there. It might be a little bit hard to deal with. So my hope is that, again, the type of riding, you're probably not going off-road. Shimano Altus, that's like one step up from the entry-level Shimano tourney. So it's, you know, it's decent, 8 speeds. It's kind of what I would expect. It's a value play for sure, but it's going to get the job done. And then the chain does look like maybe it's rust-proof. It's a little bit nicer back there. I already touched on the tires a little bit, but there's the stamp. So it's 50-kilometer Energizer. This is a nicer tire, very nice actually. It's probably one of the nicer parts on the entire bike because they're not going to get flats very easily. It has the puncture protection. That's the Performance Line Green Guard built in. Let's see if I can, there it is, Performance Line Green Guard. So it's got puncture protection, they're efficient, they're rated to go a little bit faster, they're e-bike specific, they got the reflective sidewalls. I can't stress that enough. They're really nice to have, and changing flats on electric bikes for the front wheel isn't a big deal because it's got that quick release skewer, but on the rear wheel, it's not very fun. You've got the cassette there, the derailleur, you're gonna have to get your hands a little greasy, and then you've got these big nuts. I think the axle on this is a threaded 12 millimeter axle with 9.8 millimeter cutout, so it'll slide right up in there. And then there is a quick disconnect point right here on the power cable going to the motor. So that's really nice. You can disconnect that and then take it off, but you'll notice there's still zip ties down here. You're gonna have to cut the zip ties and stuff. Do watch the tire pressure on these, okay? Again, they're rated from 50 to 85 PSI. You wanna make sure you're at least at 50, and if you're a heavier person, you know, raise it up a little bit. If you live somewhere that doesn't have these nice sloping curbs and you hit like an angle curb or maybe a rock or a bump or something, the tire can squish in, and then the inner tube's gonna get pinched between the tire and the rim, and that's called a pinch flat, and you'll get snake bites because you'll have 2 holes, one where it pinched on the right, one where it pinched on the left. So anyway, again, nicer tires, but you got to take care of them to really help them last. especially the rear. You've got this rack, you've got the weight of the motor. Thankfully, a lot of the weight on this bike is towards the middle. It's relatively low. It's very nice, actually, considering this is a step-through, because a lot of the older bikes would have rear-mounted batteries, and it just creates this like frame flex, crack the whip. There's still a little bit of frame flex, but you can see this big gusset here that's connecting that down tube to the seat tube. If I shake the bike, you can see that there's definitely like some spring going on. That's frame flex. That's what I'm talking about. But again, when you're pedaling, when you're riding around the neighborhood in an upright body position and stuff, you're probably not standing up, going off-road. You could even distribute some of that weight onto the front rack. They're doing the best they can, and that's one of the compromises that any step-through is going to face. I already talked about the plastic fenders and stuff, but coming back here to the rear rack, I just want to give you another close-up here. This is a really nice rack, and I just love the hangers. I love the integrated light. So this is Duxo by Spinninga integrated. So it has a power cable right here that runs under the fender all the way up to the battery. Same thing with the headlight. So that's the blaze light. It's the L3000. It's got dual beams. I'm actually going to turn those on real quick. So you power up the display. Comes like pretty quickly. And then you press the power button one more time, and the display becomes backlit. There's a little icon there, and then both lights turn on. So there's the rear. It's a little bit blocked by the top of the rack. However, if you have a bag up here or on the sides, at least the main reflective portion of the light will still be visible. I wish that the light kind of came down a little bit more. Maybe the light was mounted below this bar, because I think a lot of times cars and stuff will be higher up, and they're not going to see the light because the rack blocks it. It's a minor complaint. At least it has a light, and at least it has the reflective sidewalls. Same thing with the front light, though. If you have cargo on that rack, you can see the light down here pretty easily, but not up here. And also from the sides, there's a little bit of a kind of a cutout, so you can see it a little bit from the sides. They're pretty good. Back to the wiring, it's all internally routed, really nice. There's a little bit of rubbing happening here up front because of that rack. You don't have to have the rack on. I installed that myself, and then I think the light would mount either to the fender, probably just to the arch right there on the, that's not the fender. The fender also mounts here, but it would mount to the suspension fork, and then that would be the bouncing that I talked about earlier. Even the rack has these gussets. It's interesting. It probably adds to the weight. I was weighing this before, and it's about 61.5 pounds. It's a little bit heavier, but that's because it has racks and fenders and a basic suspension fork and a pretty decent sized battery, 48 volt, 13 amp hours. Okay, a lot of times I would say, 36 volt, 10 amp hours is average. It's like 350, 360 watt hours. So to go up to 48 volts, you're getting a little bit more zip and power. And this does have an 18 amp controller. And I was told that it runs at 18 amps when you're using pedal assist. And when you use the throttle, it drops down to 16 amps. So it's supposed to be a little bit gentler and a little bit smoother and maybe not kind of throw you off. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But while we're on the topic of wires, you can see that the wires are run pretty nicely down here, and that there's even this like protective cap right there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's actually pretty nice. A lot of times wires are just strewn about near the bottom bracket and very exposed, and they could get bumped if you have some sort of a rock strike or a curb strike or something right here. So I feel like this is pretty nice. Before you ever hit this, you're probably going to hit the plastic chain cover here and bend or break that. So I don't know if it's really even necessary, but it's just another attention to detail. And then this plastic piece here with the wire coming out, that's the cadence sensor. So there are 12 magnets inside. It's high resolution, it's responsive, and it's like almost completely sealed. It's not like the older ones where you actually see the magnets and a sensor. This one's all built in, and it's just really well done. So I think they've done a good job, but you can see down here, this is square tapered spindle. It's not like one of the fancier mountain biking ones. It's got 4 edges versus splined. Again, kind of what I would expect. I already complained about how the kickstand's mounted in your way, but at least it has adjustable length, so you can tilt the bike or make it straight up and down, depending on your personal preferences. 30.4 millimeter seat post right here. This is aluminum alloy. That's pretty good. A lot of times I see 27.2 millimeter. This one's just a little bit fatter and maybe gonna give you a bit more strength and less flex going on. It's about 340 millimeters in length. And the saddle itself is from Velo brown. It matches the grips and everything, really nice. It's got some bumpers built in, but if you wanted to make this bike a little bit more comfortable, we already have the suspension fork, but you could go ahead and add a suspension seat post. Now, if you do that, the saddle won't be able to drop down quite as far. There'll be like probably about 3 inches of additional height added to it because the spring has to go up and down. There's all kinds of suspension seat posts. The cheapest ones are like $25, and you can pay upwards of $150 for something like Thudbuster or the Body Float Connect. Without adding a seat post suspension, you're able to lower this seat down really, really low. Look at that. That's pretty phenomenal. And you'll notice that it doesn't collide with this rear rack. Okay, that was very intentional. They designed this thing to have plenty of clearance, to have the rack bolted down very solid, and see how it's kind of hanging out towards the rear so that it's clear. You can actually have a trunk bag here. This bike is designed to really accommodate those petite riders or people who just want to be able to put their feet down at any time. Maybe you're just using the throttle. You're not worried about leg extension and pedaling. You're just on this thing, zipping around, using the throttle. The handlebars go way down, way up. It's nice. I like this kind of setup. But again, you're trading a little bit of stiffness and performance for the ergonomics. And I think they call it like Ergo Fit or whatever. I like that the branding on this bike isn't too overwhelming. It just says iGO right here, and it's got some kind of graphics mixed in. You've got this nice, designed in Canada, and then the sizing details and stuff back to those bottle cages. It's pretty nice, like all around good stuff. And the little compromises they've made just on the drivetrain, the gearing, are appropriate for a bike like this. And then a big takeaway that I found while digging into this, the bike actually came with the throttle kind of unscrewed. I think it just got loose, and I noticed it wasn't responding quite perfectly, so I peeled back this Velcro, these nice neoprene covers, and you can see these connectors are excellent. Like, not only are they color-coded, but they're threaded, so you can really snap them together. And that means if you pull on the cables like this really hard and twist, you really shouldn't twist that far, because see how it's stretching the cables and everything, but at least the cables won't come unplugged. Okay, and they're watertight. They've got a rubber washer in there. This is really nice stuff. And it's the same thing on the other side. So we have brake inhibitors on both brake levers, the display, and then the throttle. So that's the extra cabling. The brakes themselves, these are Tektro Aries 4-finger levers, so you can really bear down. But mechanical brakes, they can stretch over time. They take a little bit more hand effort, and you can't really adjust the reach. So this is just one set reach. If you have smaller hands or you're wearing gloves, you can't bring them in the way you could on hydraulic disc brakes. So that's one of the big trade-offs. However, the brake rotors are 180 millimeters. That's really good. That's bigger, and it gives you a mechanical advantage over these larger tires. These are 700 by 38C, which is 28 by 1.5 inches. A good compromise between efficiency, like a road bike, and a little bit of comfort, which would be more like a cruiser type of bike. The other really big benefit of this rear rotor being 180 millimeters is that you have plenty of room for the calipers to kind of adjust those and get in there and tune that. Sometimes with hub motors like this, you can see the hub motor itself is, it's taking up some space. Sometimes if you have 160 millimeter rotors, you can't get in there very easily to make adjustments and tighten the calipers down over time. Also, while we're on the topic of the motor, I was measuring the rear hub spacing, and it looks like this is 150 millimeters, which is much wider. A lot of times I'm just seeing 135 millimeters. That's kind of standard, but I think they made it extra wide to accommodate the 8-speed cassette and a disc brake. I can't say for sure. That's just what I physically measured with my own calipers. But one of the things I noticed down here is that the motor power cable is actually, see how it's coming out right here, just outside of the disc brake, but inside the frame. So it's really tucked in there. So many times I see the motor cable coming out of the axle, and a lot of times it comes out on the right-hand side of the bike. And then you've got extra cables. So you've got the derailleur, it's going in and out, the derailleur cable, and then a power cable, and it's just a mess. So iGO really, went the distance and designed their motor cable to be tucked in and safe. So if the bike tips over or you're driving close to some brush, it's not going to get snagged. Just phenomenal, really nice. And in addition to those standard rack bosses, you've got another one right here, maybe for some other fender attachment or just whatever. The bike is really versatile. I was asking them about their motors, and they said, yeah, we actually designed this one. We've been working on it for a while. And it is zippy. It works pretty well. There's just a lot of stuff to talk about here. I'm going to patch this up. But before I do, let's go back into that display panel. And in fact, I'm going to take us into some shade so you can see the backlighting on that. Okay guys, we're back over into the shade. I wanted to take the battery off before we get into the display panel, and notice how it springs, okay? So that's kind of cool because it means you can unlock the battery, just pull out on that lever, and then you can completely remove the keys like that if you want to, and you don't need the keys to lock the battery back onto the bike. So here it is, 48 volts. I think this is about 8 pounds. I was measuring it earlier. And then it says 48 volt, 13 amp hours, 624 watt hours. It's a pretty sweet battery. It does have a USB Type A full-size port on the side, which is really nice. Let's go ahead and set this in delicately. There we go. And then click it back in. See what I mean? You hear it click and everything. It's really nice. And then there's the USB port that I was talking about. If you do plug something into this, Amazon has these like right angle adapters, so you can keep that cable close to the frame and then run it up to your maybe an additional light, or maybe if you have a phone mounted up here. There's lots of room on this handlebar for maybe a cup holder and a phone mount if you wanted to, because the display is built into the button pad. It's over there on the left. That's kind of cool, but just keep that in mind when you're pedaling. You know, your leg could be right here. You don't want to snag that if you're pedaling while using it on the bike. The neat thing about having a USB port built right onto the battery, however, is that you can take that off, you know, bring it with you and use it as like a backup power source. And that's a lot of energy in there. Lithium-ion battery, they're designed to be lightweight, reliable. They don't develop a memory as easily as some of the older sealed lead acid and NiCad batteries. The other thing about this battery pack is you want to keep it away from extreme heat and extreme cold. I'm in Arizona right now. It does get extremely hot sometimes in the garage. On the other hand, lithium-ion batteries can be a little bit sensitive. You don't want to drop it. You don't want to have some sort of damage. That's why they're real sensitive about allowing them to be shipped on planes and stuff. So just kind of keep in mind, like, well, where's a place that's cool and dry that's also maybe, you know, safe, where I can charge this battery or leave it. If you haven't used the battery in a few months, you want to charge it up every once in a while. And I try to avoid getting it below 20%, because then the chemistry of those lithium-ion cells sort of changes. So that's some battery care tips for you. Here's the charging port, and if you're charging on the bike, it's a little bit vulnerable because you can see the crank arm and the pedal pass right by it, right there. And sometimes these rubber plugs, they don't fit in very easily. You have to kind of work with it. So I take that out, and then actually this one fits in a lot better than some of the other ones that I've experienced in the past. Maybe they've updated that. It just fits right in. Okay, not bad. So, you know, I'm seeing all kinds of improvements, and there's a little handle that helped me carry it and get it off earlier. There's the locking port. They do give you 2 keys, so, you know, it's all around pretty good stuff. And while we're up here, this is a straight 1 1/8" straight headset right here. So it limits kind of what kind of forks you can get and everything. And then it's got a couple risers here, and it goes straight into that extra tall Pro Max stem. Let's go ahead and explore the display panel again. So press power for a couple seconds, comes to life, and it is monochrome, but as soon as I press that power button, then it does the backlighting. So I can see it change a little bit. It's still really bright where we are. I'll go ahead and take it up, maybe a little bit darker up here. Yeah, and I can see the headlight beam on the wall up there. It's not super bright because it's just such a bright day out. So anyway, here's the display. Got the light icon, speed, it's in miles per hour right now, but I'm going to show you how to switch to kilometers per hour. Pedal assist level, it starts in 0, so the throttle is not active. But as soon as you arrow up to 1 through 8, the throttle does become active. And they've set it up so that levels 1 through 3 are eco power, so it's a little bit more efficient. It doesn't send quite as much voltage. So eco 1, 2, 3, and now as soon as I go to 4, it goes to normal. So you get a little bit more zip out of this thing. 4, 5, those are normal, and then as soon as you get to 7, 6, 7, and 8, that's where it's in power mode. So that's automatic. Some of the other displays in the past, you actually got to choose the power setting, but it was confusing. You had to go into the settings to do that. So iGO's tried to make this simpler, which I appreciate. So pedal assist 8 is going to be the zippiest, but you're going to drain through the battery quicker. And then over here where it says BMS, that's your battery voltage. So it's giving you some idea of, okay, what kind of voltage are we at? It's a fully charged battery right now, but the infographic just shows 5 dots. Well, that's 20% increments. It's not quite as fine. It's not quite as precise as being able to look at the voltage directly, or it'd be really nice if they had battery percentage or something, but those are the 2 battery readouts. And then down here, it starts in trip mode, so trip distance. We've gone 0 miles so far. If I press set again, though, takes me to timer. So this trip time has only been 0 minutes. Haven't started riding yet. And then the odometer, I've gone about 0 miles. So it's brand new bike. I actually did go for a ride earlier, but I think I reset some stuff. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So we'll go ahead and hold the set button. Brings us into these different menus here. And if we want to change which menu we're in right now, so it says trip distance is flashing. I hold set. Now, let's see. It'll be set again. Okay, that's wheel size. There we go. I think this is speed, miles per hour, kilometers per hour. There we go. So it's changing over on the right. So that's kind of how you do it. I'm going to leave it in miles per hour because I'm reviewing this in the United States. There's a little bit more trip. This is where I cleared the trip distance by pressing minus earlier. Now I'm going to hold set and we exit. There we go. Good. I think everything's set up right. I'm going to press power one more time to get backlighting. And then you'll notice here that the plus button has an orange circle around it. If you hold plus for a couple seconds, it does walk mode. And that could be handy if you're hanging out in a park or something and you want to walk across the grass, or heaven forbid you get a flat tire like we were talking about earlier. This bike is 61.5 pounds. Pushing it all by yourself can be a little bit difficult, but if we press the walk mode, let's try that out here. Okay, so I'm holding walk. There we go. So it's not too fast, 2.8 miles per hour. And this is really just on flat terrain. That's it, guys. I think that's a really comprehensive look at all the details and stuff that I've discovered. I'm gonna go ahead and hop on now and just take a little ride. Okay, I'm gonna start off in pedal assist 1 because I was told that they designed this to start a little bit slower and stay slower in the lowest level of assist. In the past, there were e-bikes where it was like, yep, I'm getting less power, but it would still take you like all the way up to 20 miles per hour, which is the top assisted speed on this bike. Sometimes you actually want to go slower, so they dialed it in. They don't let you adjust the top speed on this bike. That wasn't part of the menu system we explored a minute ago. But again, it's kind of neat that each level of assist gives you a certain amount of power and a certain speed, top speed. Also, you'll notice that I raised the seat really high for myself here so I can get full leg extension, and that's back to the adjustability. They say it'll fit people up to about 6'2", and I'm 5'9". Okay, so here we go. I'm pedaling. It is just super, super quiet. I can barely hear it, and it's really not giving me a whole lot of support. We're at 6.5 miles per hour assisted, and it's very flat here. Unfortunately, there are no hills where I'm at near Phoenix right now. But as I arrow up, let's go up to level 4, because that's going to go from kind of the eco to normal power and a little bit more speed. There we go. So this one's getting me up to, maybe 14 miles per hour. I think I need to shift gears because I can't keep up. There we go. Let's try it again. Okay, yeah, about maybe 12 miles per hour in pedal assist 4. And then as soon as I arrow up to 8, wow, you can see the power meter lighting up there, giving me some feedback. It's really putting out the juice, and I can hear it zipping, but it's really not that loud. There we are, we're up to 20 miles per hour. There's the top speed. Go ahead and brake. This is one-handed with that 180 millimeter rotor. Not bad, not bad. This thing is great. I have a feeling, oh yeah, there we go. Let's try the cadence sensing real quick. There's a bit of a delay there. Still, 12 magnets with that sealed design is pretty good. And the bike is feeling very stable. So I'm not getting like speed wobble. Even if I shake it a little bit like that, the bike seems to be tracking very well. I can ride with no hands comfortably like this. And again, I think that's partially because of those tires. And with that larger wheel diameter, I'm going to be able to ride over bumps and cracks, and I'll have a lower attack angle, and it'll just give me a nice rolling momentum, really smooth. That's why you see the larger wheel diameter on like road bikes and city bikes and stuff. Okay, this first view is designed to give you just some audio feedback on the motor. You are attached to the seat post, so the vibrations are going to sound a little bit louder. I'm going to start in pedal assist level 3, and then I'm going to use the throttle, which gives us full power. Also, you might be able to hear the fenders and just, I'm going to switch through some gears and stuff too. Okay, throttle time. Now that I'm braking with two hands, it stops a lot faster. The motor's really quiet in those lower levels of assist. It's nice to have options, but you do have to press that plus and minus button 8 times, and it doesn't loop. So if you're at 8 and you want to go back down to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you're all the way down again. So, it's kind of a mix. Okay guys, from this view, you can watch me pedal and you can listen to that motor. I'm going to be in pedal assist level 8, the highest, so that you're going to be able to hear the motor really clearly and get an idea for the lag, like how quickly pedal assist starts and stops. Not too bad. It was pretty responsive, especially when I started because I was in a lower gear, so my pedal cadence was faster. And then with that much power, there were moments where it was like, okay, I might be moving the pedals, but I don't want the motor to activate. So I just pulled the brake levers a little bit. It activated those motor inhibitors, and then I felt really in control. The motor didn't kick up. And then I think the last thing to discuss here is that, you could be in a lower level of assist, like level 3. That's the highest eco level. It's very efficient, but it's definitely helping me. Fighting the breeze here, don't have to strain my knees, but at any time I can tap into that trigger throttle and I get full power. So let's do that. There we go. Fantastic. Now I'm up to that 20 miles per hour that we talked about before, and do another little brake test here for the stop sign. Just fantastic. I think this bike has done a lot of things right, and the price point of $17.99 USD is great in my opinion, especially with the 2-year warranty, especially if you can find this at a dealer who can build it for you, because it did take me probably an hour in terms of like opening the box and getting all this stuff out and then actually assembling it and being extra careful with the wires and stuff. When you work with a shop, they're going to be able to do that for you, and they can help you get something like a bag for the back of the bike or panniers or maybe a helmet, that kind of thing. So I really enjoy working with shops for that reason, just the service. I feel like this is a good value. I'm definitely impressed. I feel like iGO's done a great job with their Elite model. They have improved it over the Explorer. I haven't actually tested that one, but in terms of clearance here and just the aesthetic and possibly even the weight, because the frame, they got rid of that additional top tube. I feel like they've just done a really good job, and I like the color. Yeah, it only comes in one frame size. Yeah, there's a little bit more weight and some of that frame flex we talked about, more basic drivetrain. But for the money, for the kind of riding this is built for, I think it's just a fantastic bike. For all the details and specs that I've measured, I'll see you back at ElectricBikeReview.com. Those include standover height and things like handlebar width and length and stuff, so you can figure out if this is going to fit in your garage. Again, I go to extreme lengths to get those details, and you can compare this against other bikes that I've reviewed. I'll see you back at the site, and otherwise, have fun out there, ride safe, and share your comments here or back at the forums.